Noch keine Website? Erstelle dir einfach selbst eine. Mit Wix kannst du dir deine eigene professionelle Website erstellen. Wähle aus hunderten Designvorlagen, egal ob Unternehmer oder Künstler. Wir haben das Richtige für dich. Mit dem Homepage-Baukasten kannst du deine Website genau so gestalten, wie es dir gefällt. Es ist
Hallo und schönen guten Abend, liebe Zuschauer. Ich bin's mal wieder, der Viper, der mal wieder versucht, sein Glück hier mit dem Streamen zu machen. Mehr oder weniger gut oder schlecht. Aber wie gesagt, wenn ihr Fragen habt, stellt hier. Ich gebe mir Mühe, euch ein bisschen was zu zeigen. Bin momentan auf einem EU-Server und habe 20 Bilder. Das ist wieder relativ gut, muss man sagen. Aber wir müssen jetzt mal abchecken, wie es aussieht hier. Und ja, muss hier noch ein, zwei Einstellungen machen, damit ich sofort bei euch. Ach, weißt du was? Nein, geht doch nicht. Nein.
Hier, oder? Das war der Slab.
Nein. Du sollst nicht quatschen. So, da ist das nicht das Richtige. So, kann man es lassen erstmal. Da muss ich ein bisschen was einstellen. Was haben wir denn hier? Ich brauche mein Dashboard. Ja, Dicke. Jo, hast du wieder Hunger bestimmt? Ja, so kenne ich dich. Genau, das können wir lassen. Und noch was anderes gucken. So, mal gucken, was er hier sagt. Sieht auch gut aus. Nein. Ja, kann man verlassen. So. Ich habe mein PC neu eingerichtet und ja, es sind ein paar Sachen, die ich noch hier besser machen muss. Indem ich auch meine Katzen jetzt gerade aussperre, weil die jetzt schon dreimal das Mikrofon umgeworfen hat. Nicht erschreckt, wenn es ein bisschen knackst oder so ähnliches. Das sind meistens meine Kätzchen, die ein bisschen Kohldampf haben. Was ich euch heute Abend zeigen möchte, ist wie immer ein bisschen Handel, noch ein bisschen Geld machen. Ich habe mir die Vulkan gekauft und habe dadurch Cardless Black bekommen als Placeholder. Angeblich soll es aber eine Freelancer sein, aber hier im Verkauf stand. Ein bisschen Supi. Nee, egal. Wenn man hier sieht auf Select Locations. Ah, habe ich ja doch nur eine? Okay, haben sie wieder was geändert? Keine Ahnung. Wie gesagt, ich habe zwei Freelancer. Eine davon ist auch ein Placeholder für die WP, die ich mir bestellt habe. Ich glaube, das ist die 5. Jo, und ich gucke ein bisschen nebenbei, ob das ATV hochgeladen wird oder nicht. Das muss ich halt immer abchecken manchmal. Darum nicht mal wundern, wenn ich mal gerade mit der Maus mal im anderen Bild bin. Was ist das für eine Seite? Okay. Das ist aber neu, okay. Na gut, machen wir es so. Auch neu, okay. bin ein bisschen fasziniert, was jetzt hier momentan abgeht, aber egal. Das läuft okay. Und warum kriege ich es hier nicht angezeigt? Okay. Ach, das ist eine neue Plattform, oder? Nein, doch nicht. Ich bin ein bisschen fasziniert. Naja, egal. Warum kann ich ja jetzt hier bei YouTube X gucken? Hm? Ich will doch hier bei YouTube nur gucken, ob das Ding aktiv ist. Ob StarCitizen was hochgeladen hat. Okay. So, wo ist mein Channel? Wie gesagt, wenn ihr Fragen habt, könnt ihr hier gerne beim Chat stellen, bei YouTube oder Twitch. Müsste normalerweise funktionieren und ich versuche es euch zu beantworten. Im Moment bin ich ein bisschen fasziniert davon, was mein Computer jetzt gerade anstellt, nachdem ich ihn neu gemacht habe. Das ist alles ein bisschen durcheinander geworden. So, was haben wir denn hier? Ah, sehr schön. Jo, da ist das neue ATV rausgekommen. Vor 7 Minuten. Das werde ich euch jetzt in einem kleinen Fenster einblenden. Und mal gucken, ob das so funktioniert, wie ich vorstelle. Mal gucken, wie war denn das? So. Das sieht gut aus. Muss ich jetzt nur noch die Fenstereinstellung noch ein bisschen ändern. So, packen wir es hier unten hin. Genau. Machen wir Fullscreen. So, ja. Das ist das neue aktuelle ATV, was in der Ecke unten rechts ist.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Around the Verse. I'm Sandy Gardner.
And I'm Josh Herman.
This week's episode features our Squadron 42 project update for February.
We'll get a look at the complex AI systems being implemented in the game, using the massive crew of the Idris frigate as an example. But first, we'll get a check-in with the developers.
That's right. Let's go to Phil Meller now for a rundown on what the Squadron 42 dev teams have been up to.
Hi everyone, I'm Phil Meller, lead designer of Squadron 42 with this month's project update. So I'll kick off with the techie stuff while you're all still fresh. The programming team has been looking into issues that affect the performance of the game, looking into various ways we can optimize the code to make the game run better. The driving force behind this is to help speed things up for the PU release, but because we have a shared code base, it means that almost all those optimizations still often help S42 at the same time. For S42, the biggest wins were the animations and skeleton updates. Some of the best optimizations involve discovering where the code is updating items when it really doesn't need to. To help with our detective work, our lead animation programmer Ivo Herzog added some debug rendering that enables us to more easily visualize objects in the world, though we're having their skeletons updated every frame. That enabled us to see what was being updated but not actually animating. The debug feature drew boxes around anything with a skeleton, with different colors indicating different issues. This allowed the feature teams to put in changes that made the items a bit smarter about how they tell their system when their items need to get updated. We also put in additional debug information to show us when skeletons were getting updated or were losing visibility. Basically doing a lot of additional work that you'll never see. Again, from this information, the teams will be made aware of when this was happening and change the code to be more aggressive about when they need to update. Downside to this is that it can cause some knock-ons, especially when something off-screen does actually need to animate. But because you can't see it, it doesn't. It's not common, but these situations end up as a job for our QA team. Playing the levels and finding all the situations where the animations are broken and getting the teams to fix them up one by one. As always, we constantly look at old component updates and make them more bash-friendly, as well as weeding out the other sections of slow code and with a view to making them more efficient. We've also been working on object container streaming. The eventual aim for object container streaming is to allow us to seamlessly load and unload parts of the solar system as players move around. That will allow us to greatly increase the amount of content within the solar system without increasing memory or CPU usage, as only the parts that are relevant to you will be present in memory on your machine. Obviously, this all needs to occur without stalls or loading screens. The focus is currently on making the entity system code thread safe, so we can safely spawn entities, including creating components and loading resources such as geometry and textures from background threads. This is super important, as it will remove the stalls that currently occur when entities spawn into the game. For example, when you currently request a vehicle spawn, at present we have over 450 individual entity component implementations, everything from game codes such as weapons and vehicles to the more behind the scenes things such as the network component. We are working through the list, checking and fixing every single one to make sure that they are all fully thread safe. Once this pass is complete, we can move on from single entity spawns to entire object containers loading in the background. Now onto the Moby Glass. As you'll all know, S42 is going to have its own military version of the device, and we've been dialing in the look of the UI. The visual elements of the reskin have been referenced from real-world military HUDs and cinematic sci-fi references to further immerse the player into the S42 universe. Lastly, vital data has been visually prioritized and improvements to the navigation system add up to a better user experience. Going into the Idris, where we do spend a lot of time in S42, we have continued working on animation and setup for Duncan Chakma, the Master of Arms in the armory area of the ship.
Good to see you again, Lieutenant.
With the primary focus of S42 being the fluid cinematic tactile feel, Chris Roberts shot a whole variety of performance capture footage for the armory. So that when you get or return a weapon or attachment, you feel like you're interacting with a real character. Our job here included identifying all the common poses that the actor was hitting during the performance, then matching those with the state machine while focusing on maintaining the maximum amount of performance from the actor. Some of this performance has already been seen in the livestream event, but we're polishing up the assets to a full shippable release quality. In tandem with Chakma's animations, we are continuing to develop the grab and inspect animations for the player. These are more heavily keyframed assets, as we need to come at them from a different angle and really take the player's view into consideration, more than we need to do on an AI character. There's still some way to go to get these finalized, but once they're in, they will really connect the player to the weapon and make the armory a believable, tactile environment. Now for an animation update. Our animation department on S42 have been continuing implementing more of the performance capture Chris Roberts shot into fully functional game-ready assets. This now means we have unique walk cycles for a lot of the people in the game. It greatly helps to add personality to each character we see moving around. We take performance capture data and analyze it for the best case game functional loop. We always aim for the maximum number of cycles possible to keep as much variation in the walk as we can. Once the animator has cleaned up the motion capture data and got it seamlessly looping, we export it into the game engine and start to plug the assets into the character-specific blend space to see how it looks in situ. Once the animator has cleaned up the motion capture data and got it seamlessly looping, we export it into the game engine and start to plug the assets into the character-specific blend space to see how it looks in situ. Staying on the Idris, another area of focus has been on subsumption stability updates for crew activities. We've taken what was learned during the vertical slice and continued to optimize the primary and secondary activity setup, wildlines, etc., along with further tweaks and updates to all those logic graphs. Using the refined system, we are now setting up more scenes for other chapters in the game, such as conversations between AI that the player can witness, as seen in the VS. These are more complicated scenes that involve multiple AI characters for longer periods.
Yes? Yeah, I think it's close to being done. Sir, turning out. Hopefully we can put it to rest this shift.
Sir.
I'll let you know either way.
There's been a lot of work going into the game via the subsumption system. For example, August Beck, who's the quartermaster from the Stanton. She now has her activities set up and is in the game. The quartermaster generally takes charge of stocks, distribution, and oversees the work done by the support crew characters who do a similar job. All the AI usables that are in the cargo bay are now going into the game for the AI to interact with. So we will now see her moving around the area much more believably, checking stock and generally chatting to other AI characters. Finally, as part of the mission setup, more of the game's interstitial moments have been worked on using tech developed as part of the vertical slice, meaning more of the ambient life moments are being implemented into the other chapters and locations within the game. So that's it for me this week. I hope you enjoyed the update. Thanks for watching. See you next month.
Thanks, Phil.
Yes, thanks, Phil. Back in December, the vertical slice that premiered right here on ATV gave us a look at a UEE Idris frigate and its substantial crew. The developers have been working on some impressive tech that will help bring that crew to life.
Now let's take a closer look at the AI systems working together with story and player interaction to turn the Idris into a fully immersive experience in this month's feature.
Living Idris to me means, as a player, you can walk around the ship, you can soak in what everyone else is doing. Like, it's this sense that everyone's got their own life, their own sort of routine, their own personalities as well. Like, so, for example, if an AI is walking by a guy who he doesn't like, you know, he might not say hello, but if he walks by the player and he does like the player, you know, he's going to say hi and he's going to go out of his way to sort of greet him and interact with him. So it's all like this minutiae, all this like minor details that make up the whole story of what like an AI can do.
What the Idris shows is that every NPC has a meaning, has a background story, and you can actually talk with them. They can tell you some rumors, or each of them has a different personality.
So the goal of the Idris was always to create a ship for people, and we want you to walk around the ship and see these people going about their lives, doing whatever their role is, and generally just doing what it is that they want or have to do. So in doing that, we have every character on the ship has their own name, their own rank, their own role on the ship, and that's spread among all of the different disciplines. So we have lots of bridge crew, engineers, gunners, deck crew, even janitors, and medical personnel, and they're all spread out quite well considered, given whatever that role might be. And then we have to spread that out across different shifts as well. So you might see somebody doing a certain role or in a certain shift on one chapter of the game, but then on the next chapter of the game they might be off duty and you'll see them in the mess hall talking to people. And everybody is doing their role on the ship regardless of where you are. So you could be at the complete other end of the ship and they'll still be doing their thing. It's not like they despawn as soon as you've turned the corner.
The day-to-day of an AI on the Idris is essentially governed by this concept of a schedule. So on a Monday, all this means is that on a Monday, someone might be a Marine and going about their business as a Marine might do. So they might go to the shooting range, they might go to the bridge and stand guard, do all this sort of stuff. Then on a Tuesday, he might be off duty. So all that means is he'll go to the mess hall if he's hungry. You know, he'll go and lay down if he's tired. He might go to the shooting range again if he's feeling like he wants to shoot some stuff. There's also things like arcade machines if he's feeling bored. And it's this idea that everything is kind of governed by what an AI wants to do. So, you know, again, if he's hungry, he's going to go eat. If he's tired, he's going to go lay down. We just give them options and then they go do it depending on what they want to do.
Our game has this kind of huge opportunity to be a simulation in first place. So you want to feel real. And having a character that stays there forever, it doesn't really feel real.
For example, we might have a Marine who by default he's supposed to be on a guard post and he will go to the guard post, but if somebody else is already on the guard post, he may say, oh well, I can't do that. So he'll decide he wants to go do some training, either at the shooting range or just simply running around the ship and doing that sort of thing.
We really want that the AI can tell a story.
Your ship has been delivered to the following landing pad.
To achieve this, of course, there is not just one tool that can do it, or one feature, let's say. We try to embed inside the subsumption tool a lot of different functionalities so that designers can create a behavior that can tell a story. We want to have the systemic behavior to feel real, two characters talking in the mess hall and not just eating. Three guys walking together or two joggers running around, and while they run, they try to keep their pacing and talk about something. But you also want a mission to tell its own story. So on top of the regular systemic behavior, you might need the story to follow a specific storyboard. If we look at the prisoner scene, that I think is particularly fantastic in the live stream, that achieves very well. So you arrive to the pilot room, you start to talk with Old Man, and then there is a moment in which if you don't interact, the game takes control. And you have this really cinematic moment. You can look at the face of the character, you're just not listening from very far. This brings more immersion. And the immersion is persistent, you still have control if you want to move around, interrupt the cinematic camera, and then you can go close to the prisoner and actually look at them, and they are actually performing all their actions. The mission, on the other way, can also tell the characters suggestions of what to perform next. So after you take off from the Idris, you want all men to fly towards the next position for the next mission to do, right?
So the activity setup we've been doing has been really interesting over the last few months. We've done a big refactor of all the guys on the Idris. We've got guys like Marines, engineers, off-duty characters, bridge crew, all the deck crew guys, even janitors. And the way I've been approaching it is I would sort of role play it a little bit. So when I'm setting up, say, an engineer, I would think like, what's an engineer going to do today? What's his job? Is he going to inspect all the ship parts, see if they're broken? If they are broken, what's he going to do then? Is he going to call up a repair guy, ask him to come and repair it, and then like move on, and all this sort of stuff? And once I've got like this big, clear picture of a day-to-day of what an AI can do, I'll start setup. And I'll just start from like ground one, like, he gets out of bed, puts his clothes on if he's not dressed already, and goes about his job.
Designers can actually give assignments. So an assignment can be, I suggest you or I request you to fly to this position. I request you to defend the player from this fight. This is very similar to what, in a systemic situation you also have as a wingman commands, right? So the system is going to be very similar for the player and for the designer to ask the AI to do something. An assignment doesn't need to be necessarily a full behavior, like defend an area or defend the player, but it might be a suggestion. It might be, I really want you to fly as close to the player as possible. So you can just execute your normal behavior, but telling the story that the mission wants. It might be that in that moment, all men has to fly next to you because you are in a very low health state and you need protection. And we can communicate these to the system behaviors through assignments.
In the prisoner arrival scene, Lars, who's on the elevator doing his guard duty, now suddenly there's a group of prisoners about to arrive. So Lars is then informed of this, and at that point he suddenly says, right, well, I've got to go down to the hangar and make sure to basically guard them as they arrive. So he will suddenly leave his behaviour and then be told that his priority is to go and make sure that these prisoners arrive safely. So he will then walk down to the hangar and he will basically wait in the hangar until this ship with the prisoners arrives, basically. And it'll be the same for the other guards who are there as well. And then likewise, when the cinematic scene is finished, we obviously need to seamlessly blend them out of this cinematic sequence and basically put them back into their natural behaviours. So at this point, like, Lars is then given a completely new objective, which is to basically go off and prepare the holding cells for the prisoners that have arrived. So after the cinematic sequence takes place, Lars is then put back into a new behaviour, and his behaviour is then told that he needs to prioritise sorting out the holding cells. So he'll then wander up to the brig and then start doing a completely different behaviour, which is again all part of his natural life.
All the things that you see happening in the Idris are real, are actual behaviour running. So from our perspective, it's really interesting to create tools that allow you to create a lot of content that is not fake. For example, talking about repairing an instrument in the Idris. That process basically evolved during our development. So it started as a bit more like an engineer work that goes around, search for object to repair, and then he just repairs them. But that felt a bit too much robotic. So with the designer, we looked at this and we were like, well, what it would be interesting is to try to have like a lead engineer that goes around, inspects objects, and then he calls repairing engineering work. So like you will see him going around, look at stuff, then talking and calling out another NPC. This NPC will come and he will repair, and maybe the lead engineer will be there to inspect that the work has been done correctly. And this is really what is described in the behaviors and in the subsumption activities and sub-activities. So you can imagine the subsumption activities to be the regular job that the schedule is assigning the different NPC to do, and then the sub-activities are the actual kind of actions. So it's like an engineer can repair something, or can inspect something, or can just going around because it gets cold, and this is like the way we describe the flow and the content in subsumption.
One bit of tech that we know as part of the is this ability to trigger something based off what the player is looking at. So for example, as you're running around a place like the Idris, as a player you might be interested in or hiking that carrier cameras power all across the ship. What this tech does is say, if the player's looking at these things, the other AI or nearby are going to notice that. They're going to pick up on it, and then they're going to talk to the player about it. So anything that the player might be interested in, you know, they can get information about it just by looking at it. You know, in the same way that, you know, if you were looking at something in real life and some other guy knows all about it, he might pick up on that fact and talk to you about it. There's the ability to do these missions and gameplay anywhere that we want to. Just say, you know, a big explosion happens, or say there's some fire going off as you're walking down a corridor, or running down a corridor, I should say. An AI might comment on that and say, like, oh, this is on fire because of this. You know, and that might have gameplay implications. So the way the POI tech works is it's basically just a raycast from the player, and all that means is just like a line drawn from the player's eyes to any objects right in front of them. So for example, the engines that the player might be interested in because he's looking at them. This raycast would happen. A little timer would go off, and any AI interested or knows about that thing that the player's looking at nearby, they'll wait for that timer to go down. Once it's gone down, they'll get an event, and that will trigger some logic to say, oh, the player's interested in that, so I'm going to try and talk to the player about that, you know, and give them some information because it seems like they're interested.
So as we're building the tech, we want the AI to be more aware of one another and to react to one another in more intelligent and systemic ways. Similar to the spoil tech, we don't necessarily want to know what they're going to say or do, which makes it more interesting for everybody. And one of those ways might be to react to one of your own attributes. Like say you hadn't taken a shower and you smell, the AI might comment on that.
Maybe even take a shower. One nice thing about the older engines on the Stanton, plenty of hot water to go round.
One of the things that we're very aware of is how repetitive and jarring something could be if it's said again and again and again, every couple of moments, like Lieutenant.
Lieutenant? Lieutenant? Lieutenant?
So, we're trying to avoid that.
So SPOIL stands for Systemic Point of Interest Look Tech. And it's basically our way of giving an AI the ability to look at interesting things. So for example, an engineer, he might be interested in things like wall panels that you can fix, or monitors that display the status of the ship. He's going to look at those things. He's going to be super interested in them. Whereas a Marine, you know, he doesn't care about that stuff. He's bothered about weapons and, you know, the armory and the brig and that stuff. So he's not going to look at all the stuff an engineer might be interested in and look at all the stuff that he's interested in. Similarly, on places like the bridge, the pilot of an Idris, for example, he might look at approaching ships. So because that's something that he's actively interested in, he doesn't want ships to like collide with him. So so SPOIL is going to allow him to take a look at those ships and maybe watch out for him.
It's all part and parcel of our layered animation systems that we have. So the very basics of that kind of system would be you'd have an AI character walking down one of the passageways, and that's all well and good. But then you might want to have them walking down the passageway whilst also scratching their arm, and that would be laid on top of that initial walk. Now, SPOIL is a way for us to mark up anything in the game as a point of interest. So then the character will be walking down the corridor, they'll be scratching their arm, but they could also be looking up into screen as they walk past it. And that was really great because it means you don't know what the character's going to be looking at any given time. And that makes it more interesting for us because we don't know either.
Every AI has their own personality. And part of what that means is if the player interacts with AI in like a negative or a positive way, the AI are going to pick up on that and treat the player differently. So for example, if the player just straight up punches an AI, you know, that AI isn't going to say any more greetings to that guy because, you know, he punched him. Whereas if the player maybe fetched something off a mission and gave it to the AI as a request, the AI is going to think more positively of that character. And therefore, he's not only going to say like a greeting to him, he might say like a really positive greeting, or he might stop in his tracks and try and talk with the player. So it's this idea that every player's journey through a squadron is going to be slightly different. You might have one player whose relationship with Morrow is really positive, and Morrow gives him like loads of gossip and stuff like that. Whereas another player's journey might be super negative towards Morrow. Like Morrow essentially hates the player. And that's always reflected through things like wild lines. spoil tech, the way AI interacts with the player in general.
A really good example of spoil tech is whilst I was designing the executive officer behaviour on the bridge. She's in charge of everything. She's got to walk around and she's going to be observing people, just generally walking around, making sure everything's going well. And that was all nice, but it felt a little bit flat and wooden at times. So you might want her looking at something, but she would potentially just looking straight ahead. Whereas now, with spoil tech, we could have it so that if she was looking out a window, she could be looking at a ship as it's flying past. She'll actually follow the ship, and it just makes it so much more dynamic and just more real, tangible. It's really just opens it up. If you look at Idris documentation online right now, you'll see that the crew complement is supposed to be somewhere between 30 and 50. But as we were testing out the Idris and the crew, we found out 30 and 50 people just wasn't enough. We were walking the passageways, it just felt too empty. We didn't feel like we were getting that sense of vibrance that we wanted in life. So we added more and more people until it felt right. And now the Idris is at about 81 people, including the player. And to put that into perspective, if you look at the live stream demo, we had 12 people just on the bridge, and that was without the captain or a co-helmsman in there. So you can see how it would quickly fill up everywhere else as well.
From a designer perspective, of course, it's interesting to create a universe and an environment that is very complex, where interaction with NPC can happen, interaction with the player can happen. From a developer perspective, especially for us as AI programmers, the interesting part is to create the tools that allow designers and also ourselves to define this world and define the restriction and define the rules where things are the rules of the game.
One of the big things we have around the Idris and throughout the game is we have what are essentially conversations where you can walk past several AI and obviously they might kind of wave or nod to you and kind of do something, but there's nothing, it's more what we call the wild line, whereas there are certain AI on the ship that have specific things they want to say to the player or even to other characters, and say like if you're the player, you walk past a certain character that has something they want to say to you, they'll actually break out of their behaviour, their activity, and they'll say, actually call you over and have a conversation with you. And these things can actually be seen at a change in the depth of field with the vision. So if the player is actually looking at something, they will, like for example in the VS demo that we showed, you can actually see Lars on the bottom of the elevator, he's in his guard post, and when you approach him he actually reaches out to you and starts a conversation with you, and one of the things you'll notice is that the camera kind of zooms in, almost like you're then focusing on the character. And at that point we have a conversation. We might have like at the start of Lars's conversation, he'll actually talk to you and the player will respond and then he'll finish off talking, but then partway through a conversation there might be multiple options for a player to actually have player choice. And in this case we'll actually pause the conversation timer and basically wait for the player to make a decision. And then based on which decision they make, we'll actually branch out the conversations so that they can basically go down 1 or 2 paths or 3 or 4 paths depending on obviously how many options.
Wildline is this all-encompassing term that we use for anything an AI can do as like a one-shot dialogue line to the player or to each other. So things like greetings, busies, what we call busies essentially is an AI saying I'm busy, I can't talk. Similar to bees is another one, which is another thing, another term that we use to say like don't you have somewhere to be, like why are you lingering around and doing something. Also things like mission comments, so when the player gets back from a mission, say you did really well, the player's going to comment, the AI is going to comment on that. If the player didn't do too great, then the AI is going to say like, you know, kind of sucked on the last mission, you know, do better next time. Wildlines add a lot to AI behaviour. It adds a lot of life. It means that, well, it's the difference between you walking by an AI, them looking straight forward, or them looking at the player and maybe greeting them and you know, asking them how they are. So it adds a lot of life. The way it interacts with all the primary setup is very easy. It's essentially just layered on top. The idea is once you've set up one greeting, the logic for that greeting, it can be applied to any AI who has a greeting line. So for example, Captain White, he has greetings, Kelly has greetings, all our cast characters even some of our, what we call red shirt characters, who are like minor characters, they have greetings. And the good thing about the secondary logic is that once you set it up once, it can be applied to everyone. You know, you don't have to do that setup over and over and over again.
In the perfect scenario, if the player wants to play the story as we intended, then they will have a playthrough. If they want to influence the scene and the story, then they can still do it, and they will enjoy that fact that everything is systemic. It's not like a baked scene. It's really something that is using the real-time AI. So if an AI changes loadout or changes outfit, you will see that impacting the cinematic scene. Our big challenge is to make sure that this system is the most robust and stable as possible, so that designers, content creators are not worried to bring more content, are not worried about, let's say, experimenting with the gameplay, because a cool game, it's coming from experimentation and iteration. And if you don't allow people to iterate, then you pretty much are getting stuck to the first test, and then people don't want to change it, and then it's going to be like, it's not great, but if I now change this script, then everything's going to break and I don't want to do it, and we don't have time. It's really interesting for me to try to speak a lot with writers, to level designers, to system designs, to other AI programmers, because we want to make sure that everything we do doesn't have big ripple effect on the other systems, but they just build on top, they expand functionality. It's sort of composition method. So you want that every system can be composed by multiple elements, and you can create more without breaking the others. And I think this is the big, interesting challenge of StarCitizen.
As you can see, the cutting-edge AI tech integrating with cinematic moments aims to give players an experience that's story-driven, but also extremely personal and adaptable.
We'll have another Squadron 42 project update for you next month.
That's right. And in the meantime, you can head to the game's webpage to sign up for the dedicated newsletter, check out past updates, and stay on the front lines of development.
This weekend will be your last chance to supersize your StarCitizen starter package and add Squadron 42 for just $15. The price for the upgrade will increase on Monday, so grab both games and take advantage of this special while you still can.
In StarCitizen news, this week the PU teams branched to Alpha 3.1 as planned and continue to stabilize and gear up for deployment to Eva Cati as we get closer to release.
You can always stay up to date on what we're planning for that release and beyond with the live roadmap on our website.
Last week's installment of ShipShape introduced the first new concept ship of 2018, the Aegis Vulcan. This versatile utility ship will be an entry point for StarCitizen players interested in support roles, with the ability to refuel, repair, and rearm ships in need of assistance. You can pledge for the Vulcan now, so make sure you head to the store and check it out.
Also released today, the Aegis Wrecking Cruise Ship Pack gives you an instant self-sufficient mini-fleet with 5 ships handpicked to work together in formidable harmony.
You can learn more about the Vulcan and the mechanics involved in its repair, refuel, and rearm functions tomorrow in the episode of Reverse the Verse, airing live at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Thanks to our subscribers for sponsoring Reverse the Verse, Around the Verse, and all of our shows. We look forward to seeing some of you at our upcoming subscriber events in LA and Derby.
And thank you to all our backers and supporters for the development of StarCitizen and Squadron 42. That's it for us today.
Until next week, we will see you around the verse.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in StarCitizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.
Jo, das war das ATV von dieser Woche. War sehr interessant über Idris, was ich so gesehen habe. Also da ist viel Arbeit drin, das muss man schon sagen. Aber es ist gut. Ja, dann gucken wir mal, wie das hier im Spiel weitergeht. Ich persönlich werde jetzt hier mal gleich ein bisschen weiter zocken. Und ja, wenn ihr Fragen habt, kommt ihr gerne hier in den Chat. Und vielleicht mache ich noch einen Teamspeak auf. Muss ich aber noch gucken, da habe ich nämlich noch nichts eingestellt. Falls ihr meinen Teamspeak habt, könnt ihr euch gleich reinjoinen. Das mache ich jetzt mal auf. Ansonsten poste ich es irgendwann mal hier im Chat. Meine Teamspeak-Daten, da können wir miteinander quatschen, wenn ihr wollt. Und wenn ihr Fragen stellt, könnt ihr hier per Tastatur oder halt in-game, falls ihr mich seht, weil bei 31.9 bin ich dort. Und ja. Ja, und dann würde ich mal sagen, mal schauen, was abgeht. So, wo bin ich noch stehen geblieben? Ja, hier bin ich stehen geblieben. So, dann machen wir das weg. So, wo sind wir jetzt zu Hause? Gerade mal gucken, das aktualisieren den Kram. Ich bin auf Jella, nein Quatsch, auf Selin Hydrofarms. Nein, das ist Hydrofarms Depp. Moment, das ist Futter gewesen, was ich gekauft habe, genau. Tams Mining, okay. Weiter hier. Dann schiebe ich jetzt auch mal den Ton wieder hoch. Und mal gucken, wie es aussieht.
Engines offline. Engines online.